Hey friends, so continuing my series talking about different types of religion and how to deal with them in fantasy. Today we're going to talk about dualism, and I'm sitting on a tree because that's cool. So dualism is the belief in basically two ultimate deities, one good, one evil. And there may also be other figures that may or may not be considered deities or lesser deities or angels or whatever, but it mainly focuses on two great deities, one good, one evil. And you can see this in Zoroastrianism. That's probably the best example from the real world. In Zoroastrianism, which was the official religion and very common religion in Persia for a long time, they believed that the world was created actually by two different beings. There's Ahura Mazda, the good one, and that Ahura Mazda created the spiritual aspect of things, and Ahriman created the physical aspect. And this is how they explain how, for example, in humans, we have spirits that are fundamentally good, but then our bodies are fundamentally evil, and they compel us to do evil things. And of course, Zoroastrianism is focused on this struggle between the spiritual and the physical, and trying to get the spiritual man to overcome the physical man, which is an interesting thing because that aspect of their religion is something that I'm very much in line with, and that I believe in myself. But within a fantasy world, I actually think that dualism is a really cool basis for a religion, and it gives you a lot to do, because you can, of course, in any fantasy setting dealing with religion, there's a question of, okay, is this religion actually true or not? And are these gods, these deities, actually manifesting into the world in a normal manner? And you can do either way. But if you have a dualist religion and you have these good and evil deities going at it in this constant battle, that gives a lot of room for your characters to be caught up in this great struggle. And it gives you a lot to do because, first off, it implies, for one thing, that neither of these deities is the ultimate, right? The ultimate, the universe, in dualism ends up being a non-personal, non-intelligent entity, unlike monotheism, where that's often seen as the same thing. There's the ultimate reality and the ultimate deity are supposed to be the same thing, whereas in dualism they're intrinsically not the same thing. They can't be the same thing, right? Because nature itself has two identities. So anyway, so you have this ongoing struggle between good and evil, and your characters can very much become a part of that, right? And serve one side or the other. And that can make for an interesting story. And as far as how that can affect governments, like, you can actually have one nation dedicated to the worship of one god, and another nation dedicated to the worship of another god. And in both cases, it can be like the state religion, be very much a part of the state religion. And of course, that just magnifies this sense of nationalism, because you turn the struggle against this other nation into part of this great universal struggle, right? And of course, you can do a lot of fun things with that. You can then go and discuss, like, well, are these gods really the ultimate reality or not, or is our dualist idea actually a limited understanding of things, right? And it may turn out that both of these gods are bad. It may turn out that one of them is good, but it's not like the highest being or something like that. There's a lot of ways you can go with that. But dualism, I think, can, as a general thing, can make for some really, really interesting situations. Imagine, if you will, like, for a long time, Christians have said that Muslims actually worship the devil and stuff like that. Imagine if that were actually true. Imagine, for example, during the Middle Ages, if you had Christian Europe dominated by Catholicism, and then you had another, I'm not going to say Muslim, another group of comparable strength of nations, a group of nations of comparable strength, that literally worship the devil, right? That would make for a very interesting scenario, because they the reality of the Middle Ages, the conflict between the Muslims and the Christians was not like that. It was not that absolute. The Muslims believed the Christians were right to a certain extent, and the Christians, a lot of even though at the highest level, like the Pope and everything, they're very much antagonistic toward the Muslims. A lot of Christians individually did come to realize that their belief in God was not that different from the Muslim belief in God. But imagine if that um, perceived difference was actually there. I think that would make for a very interesting story, and I might actually do something like that in one of my stories in the future, where you actually have this a good deity and an evil deity, and you have people serving one or the other, and actually being part of this great struggle. Now, people would say, well, Christianity has some dualist aspects to it. Yeah, that's true, but in fact, I've heard LaVeyan Satanists talk about how they don't actually believe in Satan, and people ask them, well, what do you call someone who actually believes in Satan? They say, oh, Christians. um, um, but Christianity has some dualist aspects to it, but it's not really dualist in the sense that it Satan isn't really seen as a god or a creator, and the Christian God is seen as the ultimate reality. As far as the theodicy of that and how that allows for the existence of evil and stuff like that, that's a complicated philosophical thing that I have answers to for myself, but other Christians say different things and and disagree with me in a number of ways. Um, but yeah, in simple terms, I think that if you're dealing with nations and kingdoms and empires in a fantasy setting, and you have a dualist religion, you will that gives you a lot of opportunity to really show a great struggle that is going on in this world, and that is directly involving people and nations and pulling them into that struggle in a way that many religions in this world have often tried to portray themselves, like Christians versus Muslims and stuff like that, when it wasn't really that black and white. You can actually have it be that black and white, which actually I think is one of the compelling aspects of a lot of fantasy, because a lot of people, because we want to believe, we as humans, we want to believe that the world is simple, and that we can look at other people and see their affiliations, their grouping, and just know whether they're bad or good. We want to know that, and I think that's something that people like see in fantasy, like Tolkien's orcs. Like the best thing you can do for the orcs in Tolkien's world, the best thing you can do for them if you have compassion toward them, is kill them, because they're just fundamentally evil, and their existence is fundamentally an existence of pain and misery. And so the best thing you do for them is just put them out of misery, right? But when you're dealing with other humans in the real world, our world, it's not that simple. People often want to believe it's that simple, and that's why they go off and kill each other in great numbers in war. But that desire to believe that, I think, is one of the things that's compelling about fantasy for a lot of people. People want to see a situation where things are that clear, and you can give them that. Of course, if you want to play fun tricks as an author, you can give them that, but then you can later show that that's not really the case, and that and that things weren't actually that simple. Anyway, let me know your thoughts on dualism and how it works in fantasy, and keep watching. I'll talk to you in my next video. I will be talking about monotheism and how it works in a fantasy setting. Talk to you then.